Okay, guys, so I felt like going down to the beach today. Uh, Here we are. You've got the lovely ocean in the background. People are going to think I'm crazy because why am I sitting here facing away from the ocean? But that's because I care about you guys so much that you guys get the view, all right? Today we are going to talk about something that might save you years of heartache, maybe thousands of dollars, or both. We're talking about plausibility, how to evaluate whether beliefs are actually likely to be true. So before we dive in, I want to be clear. The framework I'm teaching you today applies to everything: politics, health claims, conspiracy theories, anything. These are universal principles of rational thinking. But in this lecture, we're going to apply them specifically to relationships and human behavior because that's where most of us make our worst decisions, and that's where wishful thinking does the most damage. So I know some of you are thinking, great, another person telling me to be pessimistic about love, but that's not what this is about. This is about being smart. It's about distinguishing between hope and wishful thinking, and about basically understanding the difference between what's possible and what's actually probable. So, how many of you have ever stayed in a situation longer than you should have because you believed something would change? Maybe you thought, if I just love them enough, they'll become less controlling, or once we move in together, the trust issues will disappear. My personal favorite, we fight so much because we're so passionate. That means it's real love. We've all been there. We've all had these stupid thoughts. And the reason is that we weren't thinking about plausibility. We were confusing what we wanted to be true with what was actually likely to be true. So let's fix that. So let's start with the basics. What exactly is plausibility? Is the degree to which a claim fits with what we already know to be true about the world, well-established evidence and principles. So that's a mouthful. Let me break it down with three key distinctions that you absolutely need to understand. So first is possible. Possible. It means it could be true. It's not logically impossible. It could be true. Plausible means it's likely to be true given what we currently know. And then probable means there's strong evidence making it very likely to be true. So these are not the same thing, and confusing them gets us into trouble. So say you break up with someone because they were controlling, jealous, they refused to work on themselves, and now they're texting you saying they've changed, they miss you, they realize what they did was wrong. Is it possible they change? Sure, people can change. It's possible. Is it plausible? Well, here's the thing. Personality traits are relatively stable. Research shows that without significant intervention, therapy, real insight, sustained effort over time, people's core behavioral patterns tend to persist. The relationship dynamics tend to recur over and over again when people get back together. So it's probable. Is it probable based on the evidence? Not unless you have concrete proof of actual change, not just words, but sustained different behavior over months. Evidence of therapy, demonstrated insight into the pattern. So, see the difference? Possible doesn't mean plausible, and plausible doesn't mean probable without evidence. Why does this matter? Because you don't have unlimited time, you don't have unlimited energy, emotional resources. You need to allocate them efficiently. Plausibility helps you to decide which beliefs deserve serious consideration and which ones require extraordinary evidence before you risk your well-being on them. So think of it this way. If someone told you they had a bridge to sell you, you'd be skeptical, right? You'd want evidence. But when someone tells you they've fundamentally changed their personality in 3 weeks because they can't live without you, we suddenly forget to be skeptical. We want it to be true, so we treat it as plausible without evidence. And hopefully we can fix that a little bit here today. When you evaluate any claim about human behavior, you start with what I call prior probability. Before we look at any specific evidence in this case, how likely is this kind of thing in general? So prior probability depends on three factors. First, consistency with established knowledge. Does this contradict well-researched psychological principles? If someone claims jealousy means they really love you, that contradicts everything we know about healthy attachment. Research shows jealousy is more often associated with insecurity and control issues. So there's low prior probability right away. Second, known mechanisms. Do we understand how this could work? Is there a plausible psychological pathway? If someone says therapy can improve communication, we have a known mechanism. Therapists teach specific skills, couples practice, patterns change over time. We can trace the causal pathway, the mechanism. But if someone says, if you just love them enough, they'll stop being abusive, what's the mechanism? How does your love overcome their learned behavioral patterns, their trauma, their control needs? There isn't one. Love isn't magic. It doesn't rewire someone's psychology without their active participation. Third, base rates. How often does this actually happen? What does the research say? If you're thinking, I can fix them, ask yourself what percentage of people successfully fix their partners? What percentage of toxic relationships become healthy? The base rates are not in your favor, unfortunately. So putting this together, we get the plausibility hierarchy. Plausibility means that it fits well with research, it has known mechanisms, it shows common patterns. An example is good communication improves relationships, obviously. Moderate plausibility has some research support, possible mechanisms, occurrence. An example is taking a break can help some relationships. Maybe. It depends on a lot of factors. It has moderate plausibility. Low plausibility. It contradicts research, unclear mechanisms, rare outcomes. An example, opposites attract for lasting relationships. Research actually shows similarity predicts satisfaction. That has low plausibility. And then
Very low plausibility.
is that it violates fundamental principles. It has impossible mechanisms
Essentially.
never observed. For example, if we're meant to be, we won't have to work at it. That contradicts everything we know. That's not how relationships work. So some relationships take less work than others, but still, they all require work. Where you place a belief on this hierarchy determines how much evidence you need before you accept it. And here's the key principle. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence proportional to their implausibility. The more implausible it is, the more
extraordinary
evidence it needs. That's true. All right, so let's look at a framework. So I'm going to give you a systematic framework. 5 steps you can use to evaluate any claim about relationships or human behavior. Think of this as a BS detector, not to be cynical, but smart. So step 1 is identify the core claim clearly. Strip away the emotional language, the romantic framing. State clearly what you're actually claiming is true. Don't say we're meant to be together. That's vague, that's emotional. Say what you actually mean. 3 breakups, recurring trust issues, and incompatible life
goals. This relationship will
work out long term. Sounds a lot different then. But now you have something that
you can evaluate.
Step 2, check it against established knowledge. Does this contradict well-tested psychological theories? Does it require violations of what we know about human behavior? So watch for these red flags. People can fundamentally change their personality for love. Personality traits are relatively stable. Change requires insight, effort, time, not just love. Another red flag, conflict-free relationships are normal and healthy. Actually, conflict is normal and healthy. How you handle conflict predicts relationship health. But you need conflict. Another red flag, the right person eliminates all relationship challenges. No. The right person minimizes relationship challenges, but no one eliminates challenges. Life is hard, relationships take work, that's universal. Everything takes work. If your belief
contradicts basic
psychological research, massive red flag. Okay, step assess the causal mechanism. How is this supposed to work? What's the psychological process? Common example, if he really loved me, he'd know what I need without me telling him. I shouldn't have to tell him. I hear that one all the time. So
what's the mechanism? How does love
grant telepathy? How does emotional connection overcome the fact that different people have different needs and no one can read minds? There isn't a mechanism. This requires actual mind reading, which unfortunately doesn't exist, or maybe fortunately. So compare that to if we practice active listening skills. If we learn to communicate, we'll understand each other better. That is a mechanism. Skills training improves communication ability. Improved communication increases understanding. We can trace the cause and effect. I had a client who believed his girlfriend's jealousy would decrease once she realized how much he loved her. And I asked him, what's the mechanism? How does your love reduce her insecurity? And of course, he couldn't answer because there isn't one. Her jealousy stemmed from her own attachment patterns, probably from childhood. His love, no matter how genuine, doesn't magically rewire her attachment system. She needed therapy, personal work, insight into her patterns, not more reassurance. She'd gotten plenty of that already from him, and it hadn't worked. When you can't identify a plausible mechanism, you're probably dealing with wishful thinking. Step 4, consider the base rates. How often does this actually happen? What are the statistics? Say getting back together with an ex who cheated. They say they've changed. They're sorry. It'll never happen again. Don't ask, is it possible they've changed? Ask what percentage of people who cheat once cheat again. And okay, Okay, research shows recidivism rates for infidelity are significant. That's your base rate. You're betting against statistical probability. And I just want to mention this is a little off topic,
There's really high rates of infidelity, right?
but which is scary. But the majority of infidelity are the same people doing it over and over and over and over again. That's why there's high rates. So the majority of people do not commit infidelity, but there's a small group of people who are committing it a lot. So once a cheater, always a cheater. That's actually pretty true. Or okay, another example. Once we get married, he'll want kids, even though he says he doesn't want them now. Question: how often do people who say they don't want kids change their minds after marriage? Sometimes, but it's not common. And betting your future on sometimes when someone is telling you clearly what they
Want.
that's ignoring base rates. That's stupid. Step 5, generate alternative explanations. So for any observation, there are usually multiple explanations. Consider the plausible alternatives, not just your preferred one. So your ex is texting you constantly saying they miss you, they made a mistake, they want you back. Your preferred explanation: they've realized how amazing I am and genuinely want to change. But what about alternatives? They're lonely, they want attention, they don't like that you moved on first, they miss what you provided, emotional support, money, status, not you specifically. They fear abandonment and they want to secure you as an option, they want to recall. Which is more plausible? Well, if they haven't done therapy, if they haven't taken responsibility for specific behaviors, they haven't demonstrated any change over time, alternatives are way more plausible. So, always use what I call the ladder of plausibility. Start at level 1 with, common psychological explanations like confirmation bias. I'm only paying attention to what confirms action, wishful thinking. Then move on to like known relationship patterns, like is it the honeymoon period, attachment styles, and then well-researched phenomena like trauma bonding and more exotic, more wishful thinking type explanations after exhausting the simple ones, the more common ones. An example, he's sometimes really mean to me, but my friends say guys are mean to girls that they like. I've heard that one quite a lot. The exotic explanation that you want is he likes me so much he doesn't know how to express it except through meanness. But the simple explanation, he has poor emotional regulation skills. He's learned aggression as a conflict strategy, or the relationship has toxic dynamics. He's got poor social skills, which requires fewer new assumptions, which fits well with established psychology. That's the simple explanation. The simplest explanation, consistent with research, is usually correct. That's the idea of Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is usually true. Now,
what you're
going to face. What happens when you're surrounded by people
who believe
the implausible thing? Your mom believes it, your friend believes it. It's in every movie, every song, every Instagram post. The culture
is saturated with
these types of beliefs, politically as well as
relationally. This is what psychologists call
social proof. The tendency to believe that something is true because many other people believe it. But here's the reality: popular doesn't mean true.
Just because everyone
believes something does not make it plausible. So think about it.
For most of human history,
everyone believed the earth was flat. Everyone believed the sun revolved around the earth. Consensus doesn't establish truth. Evidence does. And this applies to more than just relationships. Like I said, look at politics. How many people believe things about political opponents that are demonstrably false, but they believe them because everyone in their group believes them? If we elect this person, the economy will collapse. They're all corrupt. Well, they all are corrupt, but So these claims require the same plausibility analysis. Does this contradict what we know about how governments work? What's the mechanism? What are the base rates? How often has this actually happened? And yet people accept these claims uncritically because their entire social circle
believes them.
One example, without trying to go too far left or right wing, Republicans fascist. Stop and ask what fascist actually means, and then does that actually is fit with the behavior Republicans? You might disagree with them, but you have to stop and evaluate. You have to look at the evidence. Is there
any evidence
Republicans are acting in a fascist way? And not just fascist meaning we don't like them or we don't agree, but fascist meaning actually fascist. Okay? And if you knew what fascist means, there aren't any Republicans acting as fascists. I mean, fascist means that we want the government to be totally in charge of you, to basically own just about everything, to allow you some private property, but to own everything, and then to be able to take your private property when they want. That's actually the opposite of what Republicans believe.
Democrats are actually more
in line with that because a lot of Democrats are socialists or communists. So you have to look at the evidence. Now, what you do with that evidence, how you decide whether or not you agree with it, that's another class lecture. But look at the evidence first. Okay, people believe because of social proof and confirmation bias. They seek out information that confirms what their group already believes. And then, of course, they get punished for disagreeing, which is terrible. You should never punish somebody for having beliefs different from you.
We used to believe
it was okay, and it just made life interesting because you got to debate with people. That's the attitude that you should have. This is cool that you disagree. I love having friends who are politically different from me. Our relationships are more exciting. Conversations are more interesting. So when you start thinking clearly, find yourself isolated and you have to believe this certain thing. You have to believe in love to bring it back to relationships. Your mom is saying, but he said he changed. She was hoping for him as a son-in-law. The movies are telling you that grand gestures mean true love. The songs say jealousy is passion, right? You're going to feel like you're the cynical one, the negative one, the one who doesn't believe what they should be believing. But here's what you need to remember. You're not being cynical, you're being rational. And you do believe in love, in science, in America or whatever. You just believe in things that are evidence and in behavioral patterns and so on, in plausibility. So when someone says you're being so negative, what they mean is you're not confirming my preferred belief. That's not your job. Your job is to protect yourself with clear thinking. When someone says you just need to have faith, ask them faith in what? That contradicts all available evidence, faith that ignores base rate, established patterns. That's not faith, that's denial. So here's what you say when you face this pushback. When someone says you can't prove that someone won't change, you respond, you're right, I can't prove a negative, but the burden of proof is on the person claiming they will change. Where's their evidence? Not promises, evidence. Sustained behavioral change, therapy. I'm making decisions on probability. When someone says, but you're being so negative about love, respond, I'm negative about staying in a situation where the evidence shows it's not working. I believe in love that's backed by actions, not just words. I believe in relationships supported by evidence. I don't just believe in hope. When someone says you just give it time, you should be saying time plus change patterns can heal things. Time alone entrenches patterns. How much time is enough? What specific changes am I looking for? What would convince me this is working? Without answers to those questions, time is just avoiding the decision. The point is, you can be the one
person in a group thinking
clearly, and that doesn't make you wrong. Okay? They could all be wrong. It makes you rational in an irrational environment. And by the way, this skill transfers. Once you start to find yourself thinking more clearly about everything, you'll be more skeptical of health fads and conspiracy theories, distinguishing truth from wishful thinking in all domains. Clear thinking skill starts with having the courage to think differently from the crowd. So what happens when you apply this framework and you realize you've been believing something implausible for months or years or decades even? What do you do when you suddenly see clearly that you've been holding on to false hope? This is going to be emotionally brutal. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You're going to feel grief. You invested time, energy, emotion into something that was never going to work out. And that hurts. You're going to feel anger, probably at yourself. You know, how could I have been so stupid? The signs were there. Why didn't I see them? You might also feel what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, that uncomfortable feeling when your beliefs clash with reality. Your brain doesn't like that. It's going to want to resolve it by either denying the reality or abandoning the belief. And abandoning a belief you've held onto tightly, that's really painful. Another psychological trap is the sunk cost. That's the tendency to continue investing in something because you've already invested so much, even when the evidence says you should stop. But I've already spent 3 years on this relationship or 30 years on this relationship. If I leave now, those years were wasted. But here's the truth. Those years are already gone. You can't get them back. The only question is, do you want to waste 3 more years, 5 or 10? The time you've already invested is a sunk cost. It shouldn't factor into your decision about the future. The only thing that matters is, given what I know now, what's the rational path forward? So here's what you do when you realize you've been believing the implausible. First, acknowledge the emotional reality. Don't try to logic your way out of grief. You're allowed to be sad. You're allowed to be angry. Feel it. This is a loss. It's a loss of hope, a loss of the future you imagined, a loss of time. That's real, so you should honor it. Second, give yourself credit. You recognized it now. Some people go decades without recognizing it. You could have kept going, you could have stayed in denial, but you didn't. You faced reality, and that takes courage. Third, make a concrete decision with a specific timeline. Don't leave yourself in limbo. Limbo is where implausible beliefs thrive. I will make a decision about this relationship by the end of this month, or I will have a clear conversation about this by Friday. Vagueness, I'll see how it goes, is how you waste another year. Be specific. Fourth, identify what you'll accept as evidence. And actually, back to the third, the specific timeline doesn't mean threatening somebody with an ultimatum. That is different. So you should be saying to yourself, for instance, I want to be engaged by the end of this year or I'm done with this relationship. Don't tell that person that. Why would you pressure somebody into giving you a ring, into marrying you if they don't want to? You just need to decide for yourself, this is how long I'm willing to wait, and try to don't give people ultimatums like that. Okay? Or at least rarely. You should rarely give ultimatums. I mean, maybe you're like, you go into therapy, I leave. Okay. But yeah. Fourth, identify what you'll accept as evidence going forward. So if you're going to give someone one more chance, define what success looks like. Not vague things, specific things like, I need to see them in therapy for at least 3 months, taking responsibility for specific behaviors with concrete evidence of changed patterns, in how they handle conflict. That's the ultimatum. Clear, what evidence am I going to accept in order to stay in this relationship or to give it another chance? Write it down. When you're tempted to move the goalpost later, and you will be tempted, you'll have it in writing. So fifth, get support from people who think clearly, not from people who will tell you what you want to hear, not from people who believe in magical thinking and wishful thinking, from people who stay rational. Tell them I'm trying to make a decision based on evidence, not hope. If you see me making excuses or ignoring red flags, call me on it. When I was in college, I said to myself that I will only marry somebody if my oldest sister approves of them, because I trusted her to think logically, and so she was like my fallback. And I always said, unless she approves, I'm not going to marry them. And she loves my husband, so she did give approval for that. So get support from people. 6, expect motivated reasoning. That's when you reason your way to the conclusion you want, knowing the evidence where it leads. Your brain will try to trick you. It'll say things like, but this is different, or maybe the research doesn't apply here, or I just have a feeling this time. When you notice motivated reasoning, stop, go back to the framework. What's the evidence? What are the alternatives? What's plausible? Say maybe you do have a feeling and you're like, okay, I'm going to give it one more try. I just have a feeling it's going to work this time. Fine, but clearly define, what does it mean to work? How long will you give it a chance? Okay? define it. Clear, be clear, be exact. Finally, remember this. False hope is crueler than honest assessment. False hope keeps you trapped. It keeps you waiting for something that's not coming. It keeps you unavailable for something else. Clear thinking, painful as it is, sets you free. The truth sets you free. It lets you stop waiting. It lets you grieve what's not going to happen. It lets you move forward towards something that actually has a chance of working. So the pain of accepting reality is sharp, but it's brief. The pain of clinging to implausible hope is dull. It's not as painful, but it's endless. Okay, choose the sharp pain, make the decision, move forward. You'll be better than okay. You'll be free to actually live your life. All right. So I hope you found that lecture interesting, and I'll see you in the next one.